Well, welcome back to the Rice Report, everybody. Thank you so much for coming here. I hope you're enjoying these conversations. We're getting people from all over the place. Some folks that are analysts and looking at things, some people that are in the fight and being proactive, local governments, financial people, religious people. And again, this podcast is all about talking openly about the three things that they always tell you not to talk about: money, politics, and religion. And today we welcome Keith Gross. Keith, thank you so much for having the time to come and speak with us here today.
Thanks for having me on, Eric. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, and tell everybody a little bit about your background. It's very interesting for the topics that we're about to get into.
Well, I grew up in the rural woods of North Florida. I was raised by a single mom up there in a family that didn't have a lot. Put myself through college and went on to found a number of businesses. A couple of them had some extraordinary success. They grew into national companies, sold them off to private equity, and did it again, sold those off to private equity. And at this point, I stay pretty involved in the community from a political perspective, trying to help people get back on the right track with government. We need to put things back towards the constitutional values that made our country great. And that's really my focus, is preserving the American dream that's given me so much for the next generation, which in my view means reducing the size and scope of the federal government, reducing spending, and restoring some core freedoms.
Yeah, and I think reduction of the government size is an understatement. The U.S. government is the largest employer in the history of the world, and I don't know that many people realize that. And the size of our government, I mean, if you really look at it, we have more people working on a payroll for our United States government than the entire Roman army, which expanded across every continent on the other side of the pond. So huge government. And that is a problem. And if you're a freedom lover, that is always going to be a problem, because you're going to, if you have a bunch of people working in the government, they have a job to do. And that job is always going to be in some way, shape, or form to tax you, regulate you, restrict you. That's the creativity of government work. It's not creative towards sovereignty. But we have a huge issue right now, Keith. We have promises made to disclose Epstein information. We have, our attorney general has had the files, doesn't have the files. The files were just kiddie porn. Nobody's implicated. There's a list. And now Ghislaine Maxwell is meeting with the deputy attorney general for the next couple of days. What are your insights into this topic?
Well, I've been following this issue and have been as confused as pretty much everyone else on the outside would be. And looking at it, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. Like you said, I mean, they said, we've got these files, we're going to release them. And then turns out, well, we don't have all the files. There was a bunch of them hidden in some office in New York, but now they're on a truck. They're on the way to DC. I'm going to review them and release them. And you have to wonder what happened between that moment, where they clearly wanted to be transparent and had every intention of doing what they said they were going to do. And then they looked at the information and said, this is not right. Something's wrong here. Now, they haven't come out and said that, but a lot of folks are wondering, including me, were the documents received doctored? Were the original documents maybe destroyed and replaced with something that was completely false just to create some political hoax? Because that is not something that would be out of the usual for the left and the deep state lately. I mean, we just saw how the Obama administration essentially rigged the intelligence agencies to try to undermine and spy on then candidate Trump, and use that same fake intelligence to derail the first term with the Russia hoax and all these things. So I have to wonder what's going on behind the scenes that we in the public don't get to see. But I'll point this out. A lot of folks want to make this sound like there's some cover up to protect Donald Trump from bad information about him in those files. And that's a purely illogical idea. You got to remember that the Democrats had control of these files under the Obama administration, under the Biden administration. Democrats have had all of these Epstein files for years and did not release anything bad about Donald Trump. If there was a whiff of negativity in those files about Donald Trump, it would have been front page news for years. So the fact that none of that released in the past suggests that there's nothing really damning in those files about Donald Trump at all. It's also worth noting that we already knew Donald Trump's name was in the file somewhere. He's already acknowledged that he'd been on a plane with the guy, that he found him creepy, that he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. There was never been any allegation that, Trump engaged in any wrongdoing. And so it's kind of sad to see the right get divided on this and go down this rabbit hole, being led there by mainstream media and Democrats. It's like part of the MAGA movement is falling for the same trap that derailed the first term of the Trump administration. We've got to be better than that.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. I mean, for logic, first of all, this is 2025, Keith. We can throw logic out the window, right? So logical thinking,
Unfortunately.
yeah. I mean, but I mean, just to be fair, first of all, I don't think there's anything damning about Trump being with young girls in there. However, there are thousands of hours of videos of him with Epstein. They were clearly close friends. He went to two of his weddings. And now there's this distance of this weird, creepy guy. It's not a weird, creepy guy. He had a relationship with him for 20 years, whether that was to gather intelligence or like whatever game theory, 5D chess people want to put out there. I don't think it's illogical to think that his name's on there because they've admitted, he's on the plane, he did that. I don't know that it's covering up for him. If there is a cover up, I think it would be for more cabinet members because you got to remember he fought really hard to get this team in place. And I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. I live in the theoretical world out there, just like everyone else. I think that there is probably, I've heard all the excuses, right? Like if we released it, it would be a threat to national security. Anytime I've ever heard something is a threat to national security to the most powerful nation on earth, I kind of scoff at that. So we don't know. That's the bottom line. We don't know, but I try to present all sides of every story and let people decide on their own. I do think it's ridiculous that people are afraid to question a leader. I think that's like the duty of a citizenry is to question leadership, and it's clear that Pam Bondi is not a good leader. And I don't know if this falls on Trump. People jump to that. I don't, maybe, right? Like I won't discount anything personally. I'm not here to be a cheerleader. I'm here to be an umpire and call balls and strikes. And whether it has something to do with Trump or not, I have no idea. Whether it has something to do with all the people in the government or some of the most powerful oligarchs, maybe. What my opinion is, Keith, if you really want that, I think that the names that we know went to Epstein, first of all, don't care. I don't think any of these people actually care if you know that they diddle little kids. I really don't think they care. These are evil, awful people. If you're doing these things, you don't care. But who I think they're really hiding are the names of central bankers and financiers that you don't know that are extremely powerful and wealthy. I think that is probably a more logical deduction. The ones who actually orchestrate the financial systems, that I think that's my conspiracy. That's my tinfoil hat today, Keith. I'm putting that on here.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's true. Who knows is the reality. We
Yeah.
all have a lot of speculation and not a lot of facts, unfortunately. And I wish we had more transparency. I mean, to your
Yep.
point about national security being a classic excuse to cover up information, I don't like that excuse either. I mean, there are very few things that are legitimate national security concerns for the United States, especially when you consider that for the most part, our primary adversaries, Russia and China, have already hacked our most sensitive things. So at this point,
Mhm.
the Chinese intelligence agencies know more about what our government's up to than our own citizens. And it's supposed to be the opposite. Our citizens are supposed to really have access to literally all of the government's information. It is if it is not truly a national security concern. And I wish we'd institute some policy where, I mean, once it's hacked by the Chinese intelligence agency, well, you might as well just go ahead and declassify it because
Yeah.
the only folks that are going to do us any harm already have it. So you might as well let the American people read it too.
And here's the other way to look at it. If it's a threat to national security, you're telling me, without telling me, that our national security is run by pedophiles. That's also a concern.
I mean,
That
I've seen a lot of folks theorize that this whole Epstein thing was just a honeypot ran by maybe an allied intelligence agency, if not one of our own. So I see why they might want to hide that for embarrassing purposes for ourselves or an ally.
Well, I mean, we can like you don't have to do it, but I'll do it. It's obviously a cover up for Israel because in this case by itself in 2008, Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of underage sex acts, convicted in court awaiting trial, and he was allowed to leave the country and his final destination was Israel before he came back for his sentencing. As far as I know in the legal world, once you're convicted, you're really not allowed to leave the state, yet alone the country. And that's a fact. So whether or not that means he's Mossad or whoever, I don't know. But it clearly is something that American people would like an answer to as to why a convicted pedophile would be allowed to travel abroad to Israel. I mean, that's again, balls and strikes. But I think the other thing here, Keith, that's fascinating about this is there's two camps, right? There's one camp of we want the Epstein files, and the other one is move on, it doesn't matter. I don't fall into the move on, it doesn't matter. But I will tell you, I fall in the middle because the ones I want to know, we obviously want to know if there's horrible people running our companies and country, they need to be removed. And if they're harming children, I'm biblical. It's time for the millstone around the neck. And at the same time, we're in the age of AI, deep fakes, all these other things. I don't know. The longer you delay this release, I think the less people are going to believe what actually comes out of it, if it ever gets released.
I mean, that's
Because
one of the dangers, right, of this whole lack of transparency generally. But another confusing point that we've seen lately is this Maxwell interview, where it seems like the United States government now is going to potentially offer her some sort of deal in order to get information from her. Well, that begs the question: what the heck could they possibly get from her that they don't already have? It must be that a lot of information that they thought they had, they don't actually have. It went missing.
right.
And now they've got to go and make a deal with some woman who's already been convicted, trying to get the same information that we thought they already had. And there's also the conflict, right? This woman's been convicted of essentially acting as a pimp for children, which means there had to have been specifically identifiable transactional things to
Mhm.
convict her of. You can't convict someone just on, she might have done something wrong sometime. You got to have specifics. She did this specific thing wrong at this specific time, this specific place. And now they're saying there's no such list of that. That's impossible. If that's
It's
true,
absurd.
there should be no conviction.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a list, right? Like, I mean, like a drug dealer, the the mafia taught lessons to criminals, right? Like the mafia used to have handwritten ledgers by their accountants, and that was always how they went down. So I would assume criminals have gotten smarter since the 50s and 60s, and now they're not using. I don't know that there's a list, like so there's a piece of paper going, "Here's all the people we sold children to." I don't know that that's the case. I think that these are more files that need to be, like I don't want to see them. Everyone's like, I want to see the episode. I don't want to see anyone harming children. I want to see people who did that go to jail or
Yeah,
die.
I mean, they can't release much of this video footage to the extent it contains children, which is what they've said. That's what they
Correct.
said is a lot of these videos we just can't ever release because of what it is.
But just the back and forth of like, hey, it's just kiddie porn and he downloaded it just randomly out of 10,000. Who can watch 10,000 hours of any content? But, again, I don't want to see them. But I think the I don't know that America can move on. I think this is a dividing issue. And the dividing issue isn't, in my opinion, and I watch the stuff online. There are, of course, people going, Trump's on the Epstein list. And like, I'm not going to discount that may be true. I don't know. I wasn't there. I have no clue. I choose not to feed into that until it's certain, because that's stupid. I think the actual purpose here is like, even if Trump or no Trump, there's people who went to the island who harmed kids, who were trafficked there by someone to be used as a sex slave by someone. And that's just not good. I mean, Jesus spoke about this, right? This has been around for a long time. So there's cover ups involved, certainly, whether it's Trump or not. I don't think that's the divide on the conservative side. I think the divide is the transparency. And then immediately you go to Russiagate, which everyone assumes is a distraction from Epstein. And then in the middle of this, something we talked about on this before we hopped on, is in the middle of all this, we have Big Beautiful Bill, Genius Act, all this cool stuff coming out that we're told is really cool. But what it's done is really create a surveillance state, using the border as the issue. We now have centralized AI being offered out through Larry Ellison, Sam Altman, Palantir. These people have now entrenched themselves into the government, which people might say that's a good thing. I don't. And now that we're going to a cashless society of highly inflationary stablecoins, and I think at the end of the day, my guess is at some point in the next 10 to 12 years, there will be two societies: those who have to use stable coins with UBI and those who have to use Bitcoin for sovereignty. That's just my point of view. But this is all happening at the same time. The stats came out this past week. 83% of new tech jobs, and this is something I really want to talk about, because the Epstein, like, we can debate it all day, right? Like, we can talk, this, that. I call balls and strikes. I understand people who want to see the Epstein files, or at least see I just want to see an arrest at some point. And I think you're the same. Is just put somebody in handcuffs and do it on TV and make it scary for traitors and pedophiles in this country. That would be a great start to restoring a republic.
Exactly. We all want to see accountability, because if there's no accountability, then people get the idea that the law doesn't matter, particularly if you're in some elite circle. And that's just not how America's supposed to work.
No, but it is how it does currently work. And that has to be broken. That system has to be broken at some point.
Yep.
But let's get into the issues. Like, we're business guys. So from a business standpoint, the stats came out in like back-to-back weeks. First one was 63% of American computer science graduates are having a hard time finding a job within a year. 63% of people coming out of college with a computer science degree from some of the best universities in the world are having a hard time. Another stat came out the following week that 83% of our tech jobs currently are being filled by H-1B foreign-born visas. And this is actually something that America needs to talk about. We cannot be in a situation where we have people who are going $100,000 in debt to be replaced by H-1B visas, who barely speak English, many of them, who come in to do tech jobs. So they're working on a computer. You don't necessarily need to be a great communicator to do it, but they come in for, on average, an 18% salary discount. That is the H-1B traditional discount. You can hire an American for X, or you can hire a foreigner for 18% less. For them, primarily coming from foreign countries, this is a fortune. You know, they're living in my neighborhood. These H-1B visas are totally legal citizens. I'm not saying they're illegal, but we have a big problem right now, Keith. We have illegal immigrants that are replacing the lower class of workers and laborers, and now we have H-1B visas that are replacing the middle class of white collar workers. And I know this is something you've talked about quite a bit. Where do you stand on this issue?
The H-1B issue is just one situation in many situations where the American government has created incentives that make it more profitable to sell out Americans to foreign nations than to take care of our people. You know, we all like the idea that our government is supposed to be by the people and for the people. But when our government goes to work, it seems to forget that its primary mission should be to work for the advantage of American citizens. And you see that in H1B, for example, where they make it possible for, JD Vance was just talking about this yesterday. Microsoft laid off 9,000 workers, and now they want to bring in all these H1B workers. That's not how this is supposed to work. It's not supposed to be cheaper to hire a foreigner than an American. In fact, it's supposed to be the opposite. We're supposed to incentivize hiring Americans, making it more expensive and more difficult to hire foreign labor, whether that means importing them or whether it means offshoring jobs like with, foreign trade deals with China. And so on both fronts, with foreign trade deals for years, we've had American workers sold out, jobs shipped overseas. And you can't blame the companies necessarily. They're doing their job, right? They have a
Yeah.
duty to shareholders to save as much money as possible. I blame our government for not setting up the incentives in such a way where it costs more to do business in a foreign nation than it does to do business in the United States. If that's through tariffs, so be it. But the bottom line is the incentives have to be aligned with what is best for the American workers. The H-1B program is a classic failure of that, where foreigners are getting a better deal than American citizens under laws written for and paid for by American citizens. It's weaponization of our own tax dollars against us.
Yeah. And the H-1B guidelines are nebulous at best. So I may get this number wrong, but the last time I looked, it's either 68,000 or 85,000, but it's under 100,000 H-1B visas are to be granted every year. Now, Trump just ended the lottery, which is a huge thing. But you have this, I think it's 85,000. So every year we're allowed to give 85,000 H-1B visas, which in a country of 330 million isn't that bad. But there's an exemption clause. And for the last 4 years, we've gone from 85,000 to 250 to 500 to 750,000. These are huge numbers, especially when you're dealing with white collar, middle class computer work.
Yeah, that's a lot of people in that little niche of employment. That's a huge percentage of those employees. As you pointed out earlier, those are the majority of these jobs.
And now you have different cultures coming in. So that's legally. Legally, we're bringing in 250,000 people who aren't American. And I'll get heat from this because I'll say I'm a racist or whatever word they're going to use. I'm an American. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what religion you are. If you're born here, I want you to have advantages over foreigners. And I think that's like kind of the primary function of any nation, to take care of their own people. Like that is what a government is supposed to do, is take care of their people. And this is not taking care of our people, Keith. You know this problem as well as anyone, having owned businesses and sold them. I was a CEO for years. I won't be a CEO until they change laws. I think this goes back to Dodge and Ford, where Henry Ford was trying to pay his workers more and Dodge was trying to pay them less to have higher profits, which is when they started changing laws. And over the past 90 years of regulation and securities law, the obligations of a CEO have dropped to one mandate, which is to provide shareholder value. That is an awful place to be because the CEO has to hire the foreign person. They're pigeonholed. If they hire Americans and lose profitability, shareholders have a legal recourse to be able to go after a CEO. This is how the system has been designed as a trap. Where do we go from here? Are there anyone making laws to go back to employee value, shareholder value, community value, product value. There's so many other values that a CEO could focus on, but right now the only legal mandate of a CEO is shareholder value. And I find that to be very disturbing for the future.
Well, I don't like the idea of trying to legislate what a CEO should do,
I
but it comes
agree.
back to what we were talking about earlier, where the situation really rests in the Congress's hands, because they need to reestablish new incentives to make it so that that CEO, if he wants to provide maximum shareholder value, must hire American citizens. Because if he goes and hires foreigners, it's going to cost more money. So
Yeah.
it's just about making it more expensive to sell out Americans. So we should place the blame primarily on Congress. And unfortunately, they just aren't very good at getting anything done that we want done. I mean, look, they squabbled for like 2 weeks to get 9.6 billion in cuts done. That's like a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
They've got a
Yeah.
lot more work to do.
Yeah, and then they also do other things like we've ended USAID. Well, give it 3 weeks, there'll be a whole new USAID called something different, right? I mean, this is a standard pattern. I agree with you. Make the incentives penalizing to bring in foreigners. Incentivize young college kids if they're not good enough, because I've heard this, oh, we need more STEM people. Well, look at STEM. All of the STEM graduates, I pointed out computer science unemployment rate for the first year out of college. That's the best one. If you go down into technicians in laboratories, that's like 80%. So I literally brought up the most optimistic number to begin with, 63% unemployment for computer science and 85% replacement rate for foreign-born technology workers. The incentive, go into the incentive. I love to put people in a corner with this stuff. If you were president of the United States, which you're not running for, maybe you will. You might actually get my
Definitely
vote.
not. Can you imagine? That'd be the worst job in the world. No matter what you do, half of America's mad.
Yeah. Well, if you've got a thick skin, it's probably entertaining, right? Like if you really didn't care what people thought. But if you were president or you ran Congress and you were in charge of it all, what would the incentives? You mentioned make it more expensive to bring them in. I would also add in there that there needs to be some sort of cultural assimilation class or something. Like we have, Keith, we've lost the American culture. We have so many foreigners. We have 21 million illegals. We have about 8 million H1-Bs over the past decade that have come in here. You know, I live in Texas, and the only stores that are going up are Middle Eastern restaurants and Indian restaurants. That's crazy to me. In Texas, that's crazy. How do we get out
Yeah.
of this?
I mean, assimilation is an idea that seems to have gotten left by the wayside just because of the speed with which foreigners have been brought in. And we're seeing sort of dangerous representations of that happening in real time, with the Democrat Party essentially being taken over by foreigners, Marxists, et cetera, in Minneapolis and New York City. We've got some pretty extreme candidates there who are not identifying with American culture. They identify with foreign culture.
Absolutely.
And they want to bring those broken third world paradigms to America. And it's always been a baffling thing to watch. You know, you see this even domestically, where someone might flee the state of California because of bad policies and high taxes, move to my home state of Florida, and then they persist with the same policy views that they just ran away from in California. Well, we're seeing that happen on a global scale now with some of our major US cities, where you've got Mondami in New York City, who obviously fled his home country for a reason, became a naturalized US citizen, and now, with the backing of a ton of foreign-born voters, I think it's over 40% of the voters in New York City now are foreign-born.
That's correct.
And it used to be that that was a small percentage of the population that was foreign-born, and they would get folded into American society, adopt Western values. You know, we'd all become one big immigrant-backed family. And I mean, that's really the forming story of America. But now it's happening with such speed that assimilation isn't happening. It's a scary idea to lose American culture, and we've let it happen for political correctness reasons. We've got to get people comfortable with the idea that it's okay to want your country to have the values that your country has traditionally had. It's okay to want your country to put its own citizens first. I use an analogy sometime about lawyers. You know, you hire a lawyer to defend you in a criminal trial. You wouldn't want that lawyer to kind of weigh the balance and say, well, the government needs to convict some people, so I should maybe go a little lighter on them and give them a fair shake. No, you want your attorney to be 100% in your court, making your case and only your case. Well, that's what our government should be doing. And instead, it seems to weigh everyone else's needs and opinions around the globe and tries to balance those with America's needs. That's not how it's supposed to work. That's what the America First movement really means. It means that our government should put Americans first every time, all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, if you really think about Minneapolis, this guy running for mayor, a Somali, right? And huge Somali population. We have, when I was a kid, we've always had this. Okay. So it's not a new thing. We've always had Chinatown, Greek town. I'm from Chicago. So we have both of those two things. Great places to go. Ukrainian village filled with Ukrainians. We've always had neighborhoods, but now we have cities. And now we have constituencies and voting blocks in Congress. Like you pointed out, the Democrat Party has literally become like this evil goblin hodgepodge of awful ideology, where you have Marxist, socialist, jihadists, Sharia law advocates. These are not Americans. These are not American values. And I have this conversation quite a bit. And like I'm very good at it. Like I don't hate anyone because they came here. I don't blame anyone for wanting to come to America. It's the greatest place on earth. But when I have conversations with foreigners about H1-B visa and the threat that it proposes to the middle class, which is what makes America great, is a strong middle class. My conversations with them are kind of like, imagine you're in your homeland with people that you love and values you love and traditions you love, and then it's flooded with people from another country bringing in their values, and everything gets disarrayed. That's what America's going through. There's going to be hardship from it. I think there's a way through it. But at the same time, we all have to figure out a way around. There's no way out of this. There's only a way around it. And I think it takes American corporations looking in the mirror strongly and saying, let me grow American talent, because we have job hoppers now too. People attribute job hoppers to a bunch of, random young people that want a new job for more money, which is certainly true. But at the same time, it also comes because layoffs come into play. People need new jobs all the time because they're being replaced by foreign-born workers who work cheaper. This is an issue every person in America needs to be talking about. If you're going to spend $100 and something thousand on your kids' education so that they could get a good job, which we've been told for 50 years needs to be done, maybe there should be jobs waiting for them and not for somebody who got a degree in Bangladesh. This is an issue.
It is. And I mean, you talk about this fella in Minneapolis who might be the next mayor. I mean, it's a Democrat town. He's now the Democrat nominee, basically. He's probably going to be the next mayor. I think he's the child of foreign-born Somalis. I think he was actually born in the United States, but that's sort of an example of the problem. Our government has invited in these people, and I think maybe they did it with good intentions. They say, well, America's so great. These people have it so rough. Why don't we let them come in? Well, then they have kids. Then they take over towns. Then they start replacing us at the ballot box. And before you know it, it's not our country anymore. We have been invaded. And again, it comes back from, I think, probably nice ideas. The left, I don't think started out as an evil enterprise necessarily. I think they wanted to have the underdogs back and say, well, we want to help the person who's underrepresented. And that's just taken an extreme tilt over time, where they've just taken the underdogs side on so many things that over time they've become outright anti-American communists, where they hate capitalism, they hate white people. They want everyone who is a minority or foreigner to have some advantage. And here's the interesting thing that they forget. When you look at the global population, America's population is tiny. The white population in America is tiny.
Tiny.
People think of minorities as people of color. No, white people are actually the minority, and we are being supplanted at a ridiculously fast rate. And it's okay to mix up our society, to add new cultures, add new values. We've got to do it at a rate that is sustainable so that it works for society. You can't do what happened in Minneapolis and bring in like 100,000 Somalis in a relatively small little town, dump them in there. That town has changed dramatically. I don't know if it will ever be the same again.
Yeah. And this mayoral I don't even know his name, but his mayoral candidate was actually in front of city council and said that white people were the problem.
Yes.
People don't realize this from a global perspective. In the last 50 years ago, 33% of the global population was white people, 33%. Today, that number, nobody knows the exact number, but it's between 8 and 10%. 8 and 10% of the global population are actually European-born white people. And now we have foreigners on our land telling us that we're the problem. And not to say like we're all kind of the problem, right? Like race shouldn't matter. We're all kind of docile creatures that let the government and ideologies run over us without saying anything. Everybody is victim to that. But I think people forget that, like, if you look at the Republicans, and by the way, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I actually think in DC they both work for the same boss. And I don't see any point in this anymore at this juncture. But I will say, if you look at Republicans, like, or conservatives, right? So you have conservatives and you have liberals in this country, and then you have libertarians who they can't even define what they are. But you have these two breakups of political ideologies. Liberal wants to change everything all the time. Everything is a moving target. But people forget the word conservative, because I've heard foreign-born people go, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative. And I'm like, you're still wearing a headdress. That's not, a conservative is trying to conserve the values of their nation through political agendas. We are not conserving the American ideology or culture in anything that has been passed out of Washington, D.C. for at least 20 years now. And I don't know that we'll ever get there, Keith. I don't know that things will change rapidly enough before this is truly this spaghetti bowl of cultures that taste terrible, right? Like, we're getting to that point.
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to shake out. I mean, I consider myself a constitutional conservative, which is not,
same.
so much about preserving any values specifically. It's really more about keeping the government out of your life so you can do whatever it is you want to do, and making sure that our government works for us. And by us, I mean American citizens, not global citizens. And so I think if we were to really get back to those core constitutional values, that should be the one thing that we can all agree on across party lines, across cultures, across everything. Because if we had a government that stayed out of our lives, pretty much everything would be easier. We'd pay less in taxes. We'd have less interference. We wouldn't have all these unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats writing laws, basically regulations with the force of federal law, that were never passed by our representatives in Congress, that never had a due hearing in public. We would have a much better situation if we just had less government. And that's where I really find myself opposed to the left on most things, because at every turn, they come up with the idea that we need more government because government can take your money and spend it better than you can. And that's just fundamentally the opposite of what I think it takes to make America great.
Yeah, I think you and I have an absolute well-aligned disdain for taxation. I just don't see how that helps a country, except for paying bills of bureaucrats and paying for their salaries everywhere. Now, I think this is clearing up. I think that the illusion that's coming next is we're shrinking government. We're laying off lots. Like 25% of the IRS was laid off yesterday. Many cheered. I cheered. I hate the IRS. I can't stand taxation. I think it's slavery in every possible way, to pay an organization that does nothing but make our life harder. That clearly is run by horrible people that they're afraid to disclose, right? Like, these times are really kind of a telling story.
Yep.
And now we have to think logically. I think this is the most tricky time in America to be an American, because while we want to celebrate 25% layoff in the IRS, we also have to understand that we just signed two bills that make digital currency and AI a mandate in this country. So I don't think the IRS is going anywhere anytime soon. I think it's going to be replaced by more efficient AI, and taxation actually gets harder at that point.
Oh, we live in a scary time, no doubt. And the problem is it's been this way for a long time. I mean, even before George W. Bush acknowledged the massive warrantless surveillance programs that were already ingesting virtually all of the communications of all American citizens, he then later kind of claimed, oh, well, this is in response to 9/11. Of course, it was happening way before 9/11, and they just covered it up. Well, he used that as an excuse to sort of open up that program and acknowledge that it existed. Since then, it's accelerated. All of this stuff has gotten only worse. We saw the Snowden revelations, and a lot of people were really mad at Snowden, and in some cases, rightfully so. He caused some harm. But people weren't mad enough about the fact that our government has been violating our Constitution and using our tax dollars to harm us for a really long time. I didn't see anyone go to jail for that. So guess what? It's getting worse, and it'll keep getting worse until people go to jail. We don't have enough people calling that out, and it's us. We're the problem, the voters. We complain about Congress, and I do it too. I point the finger and say, well, Congress should have done this or that. Well, the people in Congress get reelected year after year. The reelection rate for an incumbent's over 90%. They almost never get fired no matter what they do. That's us. That's our fault. Look in the mirror. You keep voting for the same people, you're going to get the same broken outcomes.
Well, I think you could place blame in a million places for this happening, because I also don't think that our voting system is legitimate. There's no
true lately.
I really don't think the people of South Carolina like Lindsey Graham that much. Sorry, I just can't believe that he continues to win elections with the crap that comes out of that guy's mouth. And that's just one example. Like you Elizabeth Warren. You're telling the people of her state love Elizabeth Warren.
Hey,
there's a lot of things
they
to
do
fix.
now. Massachusetts used to be a conservative place that believed in freedom. I mean, that was
That's
like
right.
the founding fathers' hometown. And now you can't rent out an apartment without letting the government come and inspect it and tell you, what kind of toilet seat you're going to have. They've gone a long way from fighting over, taxation and government intrusion. They let the government run their entire life now. So
Yeah.
hell, maybe they really did vote for Warren. I don't know, but that woman's views, every time I see her, it's just like, how are people okay with open communist values? I mean, look at that Mondami fella in New York City who's likely to be the next mayor. He claims that he's a socialist, and Democrats are good at renaming things to make them sound friendlier. He says he's a
Sure.
democratic socialist. But then when he gives quotes about his beliefs, he's literally quoting from the Communist Manifesto.
Yep.
He actually says, from each according to his ability and to each according to his needs. You can't dress that up any better. It is what it is. He's saying he wants to confiscate private property, have it all owned by the government, and they'll tell you what you deserve to have. That's terrifying. I don't know why the left is okay with that if they believe in any form of freedom and autonomy for citizens.
Well, I don't think anybody in politics actually cares about what people say or what they do. I think they just care about winning for their parties,
That's
right?
scary, isn't it?
It's terrifying. And the Communist Manifesto, thank God you've read that. I would say less than 5% of Americans have actually read the Communist Manifesto. If they did, they'd be trying to end the Fed tomorrow, because that's like page 5. Step 1, control the debt and the money of a country, and you have them completely in your hands.
Yeah. I've always assumed that I'm probably on some watch list because it's on my Kindle, that they probably think I really am a secret communist or something. But no, I just want to understand what these people think, because how did anyone ever get convinced that that's a good way of running a nation?
There's not, and you're on a list because you came on my show, so you're definitely on a list already now. If you weren't before, Keith, you certainly are now, and that's a badge of honor, as you well know. But we've hit our time today, Keith. This has been such a great conversation. I want to catch up with you again because JD Vance talked about, and again, I'm going to reiterate this: words are words. Politicians, they can say whatever they want. There's all kinds of ridiculous things coming out. If Trump, I'm going to end property tax. You can't do that. That's your local municipality, who about 70% of their revenue comes from your property tax. So if you think that, and this is just my opinion, maybe it happens. I hope it does, because property tax is absolutely theft. We actually don't own anything in this country already. But if you think local municipalities are going to be like, you know what, let's vote to end property tax and we won't have any money or power anymore, that's probably not going to happen. Might get lowered. That would be a good thing, especially in Texas. We get destroyed on property taxes. But this has been such a good conversation. Let's check up on this. You're the only person I've had on here who wants to talk about H1-B visas and actually understands what's happening. Every day we talked about Microsoft, but Amazon just laid off a bunch of executives in that category. They're exploring H1-B visas. Meta has done the same thing. They're building a data center the size of Manhattan. And they're already talking about staffing that with about 80% foreign-born technology people. So this is something that every American needs to keep an eye on. Keep bugging congressmen. Whatever it is we're supposed to do that doesn't work, well, I guess we have to continue to the insanity of doing the same thing over and over again with no actual results. But we have to do it. We have to do it. And I think eventually this country is going to have enough. I mean, I think there's going to be enough people who realize how bad our Constitution is being violated daily. Or we didn't even get into court systems. I mean, that's literally the most corrupt part of America, is these elected judges. I don't believe any of these, a judge will have a vote for a local judge, powerful judge. By the way, federal judges can't be fired. That's ridiculous. They have lifetime
Well,
appointments.
it's pretty hard. There are ways to fire them, but it takes a Congress with enough backbone to actually do it.
Yeah, so it's impossible.
Pretty much. I mean, effectively, yeah. I mean, we haven't seen it happen, even though we've seen some pretty awful decisions. Several of these people should have been fired, but they haven't.
Yes.
So it's obviously not very practical to fire them. But, you talk about these things, and I see a glimmer of hope. Right now, when you look at the statistics, a 20-year-old male in the United States is more conservative than 75-year-old males. I don't think the left understands just how much they have radicalized this upcoming generation with their grabbing of power, with the way they shut down the whole world during COVID and just engaged in massive tyranny, invasion of privacy, etc. The young generation, they saw all of this happening, and they are saying, not again, not on my watch. I think they're going to be the generation where we can restore constitutional values.
Yeah, the one thing I love is watching the older people beat up on Gen Z. I've been saying this for about 9 months now. Gen Z is going to be completely BA. Like they are going through, they are being refined like gold through the fire.
Yep.
And when you watch them turn 35, 40 years old, when they start having kids and all this crap they've gone through, they can't buy a house. The job they get doesn't pay enough. And it all comes from Congress. all of it comes from legislators. I think that's when you get back to the old American peaceful revolution, and people putting their foot down and saying, we've had enough. And Gen Z, start talking to these kids. They're smart. They are absolutely craving the truth. They know they've been lied to since they were children by their parents who believed in ideologies that were completely false too.
Yep.
I think that generation, I agree. I always see a glimmer of hope, right? Like you make all the stable coin things you want. I'm in Bitcoin. Like, you're not going to control my money. You have the ability right now to make great decisions for the future, because eventually this levee breaks. There's enough knowledge, enough anger, enough disclosure of things that have happened in the past, enough truth being disclosed by people. This isn't going to be tolerated for very long, but there is going to be a 5, maybe 7 or 8 year run of, tyrants trying to put their boot on your throat one final time before, people start saying we've had enough. And that's going to be Gen Z. If I were at a casino, I'd be putting all my money on Gen Z. I'll put my money on Gen X. I'm Gen X. We're the ones who are going to make the ruckus, but I think Gen Z is going to be the one that puts their foot down. And that's an awesome thing for the future.
It really is. So there's hope.
There is always hope, and there's always hope. So I was round this out by, kind of my new mantra. I have a new mantra for conversations every couple of years. Focus on 4 things. You could talk about all the politics and all the craziness and surveillance state and get into that all you like. And I do it all the time because I think it's important to understand the environment you're in so that you can make better decisions and create a positive impact. But faith, family, health, and wealth, those are the 4 things you focus on. You focus on those 4 things in order every day. Your day is going to be better. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be healthier. You're going to be wiser. You're going to be more grounded. You're going to have more love. You're going to have a better eye on your own wealth, which taxation is threatening to take from you daily. And when enough people start focusing on that and stop spending 26 hours a day on social media worrying about Donald Trump or Joe Biden or any of these other people out there that you don't know personally, focus on your own life, your own local neighborhood, make changes in your town. Things get better. But they get better when we start doing the work. Freedom isn't free.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for running this show and for inviting me on it. I really love what you're doing here.
I appreciate it, Keith. And thank you for coming on here. How can people follow you online or anywhere at all? How can people stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can sign up for my newsletter at keithgross.com. And I'm also on all social platforms at KeithGrossFL. I'm pretty active on X and would love to engage with folks more on there. Shoot me some messages, and I love to be in the comments. And it's nice to keep a conversation going with everyone, because if we keep pushing in the right direction and restoring these constitutional ways of thinking, that's how we get to where we want to go. That's how we make America what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, we need to change ourselves, not worried about Washington, D.C. We need to change ourselves. I agree with you. Keith Gross, thank you so much for being on here. God bless you. God bless this country. And we'll see you all next time on The Rice Report. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.